I call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee for Wednesday, October 9, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for attending here tonight. A couple housekeeping things. First is you might want to shut off the ringer on your phone, a little switch on the side. Second is this meeting is being broadcast live on SMAC and recorded for future viewing. Before we open the public hearing, I'd like to make an announcement. I'd actually like to call for a moment of silence in memory of Mr. Joe Soares. Joe Soares was a member of the Finance Committee and through a tragic accident recently passed. And it's a huge loss for the town. So I'd like to just have a moment of silence for Joe. I knew him for years. I don't even know how many years, probably at least 10. I probably known him for 10 years. He was on this committee when this happened, and I just would like to call for a moment of silence. Thank you very, very much for that. Okay, that being said, looking for a motion to open the public hearing.
Make motion to open the public hearing.
Second that motion.
Okay, motion by Carolyn, second by Heidi. Okay. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is opened. First article we have listed here is Article 13, School Capital Projects. There are 4 sections to it, A, B, C, and D. Mr. Struck, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, point of information, or whatnot, whatever you want to call it. Are we going to be going by the draft one that was sent as our final thing, or are we getting a new updated, or what?
The motions are going to be written up very soon. We should have motions for all of the warrant articles probably by the beginning of next week. And the actual warrant isn't changing, but we will have motions for that by the beginning of next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, Lisa.
Can't believe I forgot that. In terms of, we have new members on the Finance Committee. When do you want me to address, as the chair, whether or not they have received the Finance Committee handbooks?
What was the question?
I'm looking for the new people to the Finance Committee to receive the Finance Committee handbook, and as a refresher to all the existing members.
That's been emailed out.
Was that, I'm sorry, did I miss that email?
I don't know if you missed it, but it was emailed out.
Everybody got it?
Yeah,
That's
I got it.
new.
I got it today. It just
Okay.
came out today.
Oh, it came out today.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, you're
I
okay.
apologize. I haven't seen the email since. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Article 13. Do we have a presenter for this? Dr. Baeta? Section A. Would you like to cover that first? Telephone system replacements at various schools.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. Thanks for having us this evening. To my left is the chairwoman of the committee, Ms. Catherine Weiston. On the other side is Ms. Heidi Perkins, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. Looking at I forwarded an email with some explanation of what's taking place. In the first 2 articles, these are both part of that sunset discussion that will be taking place going forward. These articles the money is there in both of these articles, but because of timing and so on and so forth, these articles were sunset as part of the rules. that took place. I believe there's an article to disperse that article and change it so that those funds can be utilized. In the case of the telephone system, during the high school build, the phone handsets were not securing to the phone bases on the walls, and instead were falling off the bases. So at that time, what took place was we used the school department stock that we had in order to build out that project. If you recall, that phone process was a town-wide initiative. So we are asking to now replace our stocks for two reasons. Number one, on average, we have about 4 phones or so, give or take, that things happen to. Second, because we don't have that stock, we are not able to put phones in a number of new areas. As you know, our enrollment is pretty significant, so we've had to build out classroom spaces as well as a number of different offices, and those phones don't have direct access. This quote does include about 50 hours of labor to complete the what's called the paging portion of the system. The second article on there, complete the HVAC service, this is again a timely one. The gear switch lead time is 40 weeks. I want to say that again, at the time was 40 weeks. And we also have to shut down the school for about 10 days, and we have to do that prior to summer school, starting at the DOS school, because that's where we hold our summer programming, what's called Special Education Extended School Year, or ESY. The majority of the actual project has been paid for with the grant. The required electrical upgrade was not part of the AC installation bid, and that is the reason why you're seeing that. And so that you know, the grant expired on the 30th of September under ESSER, as we were doing both of the schools. In terms of the grades K-5 charging stations from Chromebooks, this is really a long-term investment for the district for two reasons. Number one, we're really, during COVID, our students were taking home the technology because that was part of the process. What we're seeing now is just a significant increase of those devices being broken on a regular basis. By having a cart system, those devices get charged in the room, left in the room, don't leave the school building. And so therefore, we don't see the continuous damage of the $300 Chromebooks. So that's what those are being utilized for. And then lastly, you have the capital needs assessment. This is taking part one, which is the master plan, and now getting into the weeds. The need is to bring in professionals in the field, what I've utilized as a building envelope study where you're looking at everything to do. We would be looking at all 8 of our buildings. Yes, that would include the high school. That's any day now will be 10 years old, and right after that 20 years old, and so on and so forth. And we need to start thinking about capital planning for that as well. That master plan would come out and provide us the 5 to 10 year capital plan, which we can then budget and work through the town's capital improvement plan, and then through you folks, and then town meeting as a way to make sure that large projects are no longer fundamentally as often taking place in Stoughton as they currently do. Those are the 4 articles of the school capital projects.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Baeta. You've covered telephone system replacements at various schools, Article 13, Section A. Article 13, Section B, complete HVAC services at the DAW school, and you've also covered Article 13, Section C, grades K through 5, charging carts for Chromebooks, and also Article 13, Section D, capital needs assessment relative to all school buildings. So are you prepared for questions on all 4 of these, any of these right now?
I am.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee on any of these? Mr. Joel Wolk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Baeta, could you explain to us the source of funding for these projects?
Do you want to answer that?
Sure. Hi. I'm sorry. Heidi Perkins, Assistant Superintendent for Finance. Is that-
Yes, Biz? Would you step forward and grab a mic, please? Please identify yourself for the record, too.
I can handle it. Perfect. I'm gonna steal this.
Okay, good evening. Thank you
Mr.
for
Tisdale's bringing
asking.
you a chair.
Oh, thank you. Oh, what a nice man.
He is really the best, you know?
Okay, the funding sources that we can balance all these expenses with are prior articles, and we come to $368,560,10 that we can use from prior articles to fund these particular needs of the school department. There are 16 different articles that will be closing that fell into the sunset clause. The dates the articles run from May of 2012, when they were voted at town meeting, through June of 2020. So this is part of the sunset clause action that will clean up a lot of accounts and provide funding for needs of the school department.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you repeat the number again? I thought I heard it as 365, or did you say the full amount of 368?
The full amount will be covered as noted on the town meeting warrant article. I believe that's 368,560.
Thank you.
So are you saying there's no new borrowing in here? Is that?
There is no new borrowing, there's no free cash funding, there's no budgetary funding. This is from a different existing funds that we have on hand right now. And as we prepare that motion for the Select Board and the Finance Committee, you will have that listing at that time.
All right, thank you very much. Joel, do you have any other follow-up questions on that?
Well, she kind of answered the question, which is, can we get a listing of what all those articles are prior to us voting on this to move it forward?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bayetta, on the capital needs assessment, will that also include the South Elementary School?
It will include all 8 buildings. Sorry.
Okay, is this similar to, I thought we did one of these some years ago. I think, didn't DRA do one some years ago?
Yes, we had a master plan that is dated from March of '23 and goes back before this, and even before that, actually goes all the way back to, I believe, 2013 or 14. What this does is it takes that report and it gets into the weeds of exactly what we need to be done, calculates it out, we prioritize it, bundle it as needed, which is a way to cost save, which is not something that was done in the last report, and then prioritize and move forward with capital needs.
Okay, can I assume therefore that this is something that you're going to go out and advertise for a new consultants?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Mark, you have a question, comment?
Yes, on the charging carts for Chromebooks. You're saying that their Chromebooks are going to now be left at school and not be taken home. What about the students that don't have a home computer? And what about, like, I know most of the homework now is on a computer.
Yeah, so you'll see some shifting in the teaching and learning of that. This will be K to 5, but we will be charging, looking at K to 3, then 4, 5. The issue is we're not sure that, and we have the data, the background, that in today's world, those Chromebooks at home are always being used for homework. Matter of fact, the timing on some of those will show that they're being used for other things beyond homework, i.e. games, so on and so forth. Screen time is also something that we are looking at more and more today than ever before. Because of the utilization of cell phones. But we will work with families, of course, if they're going to go home or if there's a need to have it at home.
Right. Well, that was, part of the thing is I know my kids, they liked going, there was a certain program where they could read books, and it was great. But if it's taken away, how are you guys going to accomplish that?
The idea is to reestablish the utilization of Chromebooks for teaching and learning. We have looked at this very closely. We cannot afford the loss of 40 Chromebooks a month.
Right. That's understandable. I was just making sure.
So we are now playing, I'll just say, the superintendent is acting as the parent and saying the Chromebooks are going to stay in our home for a while until we reestablish what we're going to use Chromebooks for.
Right. I just want to make sure that nobody's left behind.
And we will make sure that happens.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Lauren, do you have a question?
Hi. Just curious, the phone system, what is it going to be? Which, is it Cisco? Is it?
Sorry about the wait. Is it this one? Yes. I really can't get too technical with it because I did not quote this out. This is our technology director that handles this, and Joyce Husseini before that, and she's left. But he did get a recent quote, and essentially, you know, it's the phones in all the classrooms and offices, and we have the vendor is Vertical Communication, the same ones that we have now. And it essentially, depending on, you know, there's a couple different models here, depending on the location that he has determined of where they need to go. And the paging system that was part that Dr. Baeta mentioned was never done initially. That was supposed to be done when the phone project was done. So that is included in this quote to finally get that up to snuff.
Thank you.
They're the same series of phone, but they have either a 4-line, a 6-line, or an 8-line opportunity.
All right, thank you for that. Carolyn, you have a question or comment on this?
Thank you. I understand with the Chromebooks, you're trying to not send them home with grades K through 5. What about for grades 6 and 12, 6 through 12?
No change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Linda?
Hi, I just have a question on the grant that on the telephone system. You said it expired September 30th. Was it a lot of money? Were we able to, did we lose that money? Like,
Yeah,
what happened with that?
I'll clarify. We did not have any grant on the telephone. The grant is part of the HVAC system at the Daw Elementary, and the second part was at the Gibbons Elementary.
Oh,
And those
okay.
were the ESSER funds, the federal funds that came in during COVID. And at the time, the prior administration set aside a significant amount of money to make sure that we could take 2 of our elementary schools and move them to actual air-conditioned.
Okay, did that happen?
Yes, with the idea that this part is the missing part, the electrification, but the
Okay.
actual HVAC systems are in place.
All right, how much was that grant?
Do you have the number? 3 points.
So the grant itself is similar to when the town got the CARES grants, et cetera, the COVID money that was federal. The grant itself was, I believe, $3.8 million. We were required to do over a number of years. It's a multi-year grant.
Yeah.
A lot of educational aspects, but we were allowed to do a capital portion out of that grant. So the Daw School was mostly funded for the HVAC out of that grant, and some of it out of other funds. The second piece of doing the Gibbons will be 100% out of that grant and another grant we wrote. That will be no taxpayer funds whatsoever for the Gibbons. I'll point out that the electrical upgrade is only needed at the Daw, and it was not in the actual build. Right now, to finish the punch list, they have it temporarily tied into the current electrical system, but that is not the long term. So to have this $1.8 million HVAC system working requires this electrical upgrade. The Gibbons will not need an electrical upgrade. It's all
Okay.
set when that one's done,
Okay.
if that helps.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments on any of our... Lisa, you have a question or comment on this?
Yes, hi. So those 40 Chromebooks per month per school, how long did that go on for?
We did one analysis of that to make the determination that it needed to stop. So in terms of, we saw it, and then we said, we need to act on this. So we didn't have it 40, 40, 40, 40, 40 over and over again. What we saw was them being destroyed, and we said, we got to stop this as soon as possible. So we currently haven't been sending them home. The problem is, I can't charge them without a charging card.
I've got that. Okay, is there any, do we do books anymore at school?
So, yes, we do. And at the elementary level, our classroom's actually based on a classroom library. So if you walked into a library classroom, an elementary classroom, you'll see tons of books in actual classrooms where students have choice of reading about animals or whatever, they're according to grade level. But there's also been, over the last, I would say, 20 years, a huge move to everything is electronic. That's where the companies are. But we still have books that we purchase pre-K to 12, or I should say K to 12. But Chromebooks have become the thing for a number of different things. Number one, that's where higher education is. Number two, that's where the workforce is. And so we start utilizing, that's where the state assessment is. All state testing is now online. But yes, there are still books. We still purchase books. We still utilize our literacy program with books and online. Sometimes the enrichment's online, sometimes both are online. It really depends on the program that we're utilizing.
Okay, so in terms of, is any curriculum being done through the books? I know you said there were books to be reading, but is there any curriculum?
Sure. For example, if we take a look at our science, our social studies, our reading, and our specifically our mathematics, is a lot of it is still being done. Kids still, you'll see within our budget every year we have the manipulatives of the workbooks, that every kid gets one workbook, and then at the end of the year you got to go out and buy some more type of thing. But yes, we still have books and all those things, not just technology.
Okay, thank you. And then I just had a question on the capital needs assessment. I am thrilled that you're planning to do and collaborate with the town to do a combined capital plan for the town. My question there, watching a recent school committee meeting, did I hear that 12750 amount has changed? Or does that amount of money for the complete capital assessment for the schools remain at that 120?
So the quote that we got, we obviously, due to procurement regulations, will have to go out to bid. So that was from one vendor that we called to give us, to be able to put this forward. It could be, if it's a little bit more, we would have to figure out the difference. If it comes in less, that's gravy. So, and there'd be article money to turn back. This particular vendor, I myself have been in other districts that use them, so that's why I just called that vendor. But it doesn't necessarily mean that will be the vendor. And I just want to add a little context to that. As Dr. Baita said, it will be the building envelope, but thinking about, you have, a turf football field and different things. So knowing when it's time to replace turf and all of that.
Oh, I watched the whole thing. I understand how important this is.
It'll all be in that. And then we will add beyond that our capital and FF&E if we have things to give the town a complete look and be able to plan and smooth out costs, hopefully. So that's what we're trying to do. And the town manager's office also asked for us to forward one. So I just wanted to add that context. So
Thank you all very much for doing that.
We have a commitment to Mr. Coulter and Mr. Tisdale to get a written, detailed capital plan to them for implementation for July 1st of, I believe it's 26. So the idea is to really begin the process of providing a plan that every year you see what the cost is. The money may be there, the money may not be there. The prioritization may be animal control or the South School. I mean, you don't know, but at least you have that cost, and then you just
roadmap.
And then after that, your upgraded costs could either be during the bid process, or it could be that you're just calling somebody and saying, "Hey, you said that was going to cost $12,000 a year ago. Should I add 3.5% to that, or what?" So that you have a better working document.
And I just had one that would probably be for Elizabeth. Hi. Yeah. So this is just a general question. Just generally speaking, it sends me as a taxpayer, and I know this is all before your time, that we would have money hanging out there from 2012. And I understand, and I'm grateful to our resident taxpayer who put this forth, even though it tortured you for the past significant amount of months. that all this money to be used, I understand, tell me if this is a correct statement, that all that money, that source, is one-time money going to pay these one-time expenses. Is that a correct statement?
Well, we'll start out with, yes, I have been tortured. It has been a very long process to reconcile all these accounts. When I first started here, I did speak to the finance chair, Mr. Enochian, regarding all the outstanding projects that I saw, and that I would start closing them out. However, that was interrupted by the knowledge of the petition article to close all articles. So at this point in time, there is no borrowing. Every single article here will be closed. We have already closed a significant number of articles through the authority of the Select Board. And there are a number of articles, as you'll see in this town meeting warrant, that will be closing through the authority of town meeting.
Okay, so in general, with regard to that, do we know how much from May 2012 to June 2020 that you've worked so hard to identify, how much money that is in total?
For this particular project, which is to cover the capital for the school department, we are closing out $368,560 on this particular capital project listing. Secondly, if you refer to your town meeting warrant, each article defines what's going to be closed. So your figures are right there in your town meeting warrant that you can take a peek at. You'll see different color codes. One's yellow, one's blue, one's green. So that will lead you to the figures that you're looking for. I'm not sure what page it's on. It might be on page...
I'm looking at the backup right now, so it's on the actual...
It's on the actual warrant itself.
Okay.
Okay, with the totals.
And so they're color-coded, and is the key on there with the color?
It says exactly on the article what's being closed and why it's being closed.
Okay, so when it's closed, where does that money move to? Does it move into the general fund, or does it become part of free cash, or is that one and the
If
same?
you look at the article itself, it will say what the disposition is for each and every article that will be closing. Some of them go to the general fund. Some of them will be closing out to the enterprise funds. It's all based on how they were voted, which goes back a multiple of years. So research had to be done on every single one of these. So if you look closely at the article, it will define exactly where the money's going back to.
Okay, so going forward...
Lisa, I'm going to stop you for a second.
Yep.
I want to clarify this discussion before we
Yep.
get really far down into the woods on this. It's on page 12 in the warrant, and there's a little chart, and it shows you on the far right, it says, like, just for example, it tells you where it's going to go back to. So we're going to try to keep this conversation in regards to Article 13, but to answer that question about where the money goes back to, there's a chart on page 12 of the warrant, and it shows you, I think there's only actually two colors. There's a yellow color and there's a blue color on it. But anyway, on page 12, it shows where all the money goes back to, depending where it came from, in reference to what Biz had said.
Just realize when I ask these questions, it's not just for the people in this room, it's for the audience watching as well, because that's how I learned.
I'm aware of that too, and that's
Okay.
why I'm announcing it publicly
Okay.
so everyone can know
Okay,
to look
awesome.
at page 12.
Thank you.
But continue your question.
Okay, so that was basically on the closing out of the accounts. And then just on, from my email earlier today, on the revenue sheets for fiscal year 24, 25, and 26, unless I missed that today.
We want to keep this discussion relative to Article 13.
Well, it is relative because it's all of this relates to budgetary, and before we spend millions of taxpayer dollars,
Biz has answered the funding source for Article 13, but the discussion you're talking about might be
and other
tomorrow.
matters.
It might be
Okay.
It might be tomorrow. In
Okay, I'll withhold.
Just
the
want to keep
question until
everything
tomorrow.
where it
While
needs to
she
be.
was here, I didn't know if she was going to be here tomorrow.
She'll be
or
here
not.
again tomorrow.
Okay, I'll reserve the question then.
Thank
you
you.
for your time.
You good with Article 13, Lisa?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Arnie, you have a question on
Yeah.
Article 13, Section
I-
A, B, C, or D?
I do. The assistant superintendent mentioned that the capital needs was based on one estimate. Is there any chance you can choose an estimate that won't be 120, that could be higher?
Excuse me.
Wait, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you say higher or did you say lower?
Higher.
That is where I think there would be a limitation, because as far back as I can remember, we've always had a limit where you can never exceed the size of the motion. So if the motion says 120,000, you can't make a motion that says 130. That won't be allowed. It would have to stay at 120.
But correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the assistant superintendent mentioned that they had called someone up, and was that a verbal or a written estimate? Okay. Are any of the others based on one estimate?
No, you can if you want.
Like, for instance, the phone system.
So for this purpose, to come forward with a reasonable estimate of what an article would be, we call and get one estimate, because companies typically are not going to come in and look at a job this size until we actually put out a request for quotes or request for proposals, depending on what we're doing. So when the request goes out, when we actually have a procurement and we have to have funds allocated to be ethically putting out a procurement, at that time we will get hopefully several quotes or bids. In this case, it would be a bid because it's over $50,000. And once the bids come in, we would go with the lowest bidder. If that happens to exceed the amount voted, we would have to then figure out how we would make up the difference, and we would try to look inside our budget to find that savings. But oh no, I think you're talking about the capital assessment.
Capital and like, for instance, the phone system have you gone out for bids for that yet?
We got a single quote, but a lot of times stuff like that is actually on state bid, and you don't have to go out and get several. And if you did, and if they were all on the state bid, it tends to be roughly the same. So again, this is to bring forth what our best knowledge is at the time. But on the capital needs assessment, we would write up our specs of where, 8 buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the envelope, the grounds, and then we would actually get bids, which would also be true, usually in any of the town departments.
So if it goes over, it's going to be taken from your existing budget that was approved by town meeting?
If it goes over, we would have a choice of going back out to bid by collapsing the scope of our specs and make it in a little bit of a smaller scope. We could go out to, we could look at making up the difference with budget. So we would have to see what it comes in. I will say this company, it just so happened that the person who answered the phone is very familiar with Stoughton. I did not know that when I called them. They don't live in town, but they're here like every week for something. They just happen to mention it. They've been in business for about 25 years. They do a lot of municipalities, a lot of school districts, a lot of town buildings as well. And I personally have experience with them, but usually they go by the square feet. So they asked for the square feet of all of our buildings. Our facilities director sent that, and they based it on the square feet of what they actually would be quoting at the time. But it still has to go out to bid under the procurement regulations. Sorry, yes.
Having resided in this town and been a former town meeting, one of three things will happen on any article. Number one, the scope of the article after it's passed, if it comes in at a higher bid, a decision is made either to find the funding somewhere else or to go back to town meeting and ask for more money. The other component of it is, and I'll give you an example, we have currently from municipal meetings the other night that we were at, we had a number of articles that are coming back for more money because the timing of that article is, in one case, is doubled and is coming back for 50% more of what the original article was for. So those are the decisions of the process we would have to go through. Typically on the school side, we're pretty lucky because our connection to the state bid process is a lot of our items are connected to that. So when we call one of those companies that's already been, quote, blessed by the state as being a best price option, we're usually in the ballpark. You know, I can't guarantee it, but usually very close to the ballpark. We had one particular one recently that I saw that the difference was $250. That's just an example.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your information.
Okay. We have any other questions, comments from the committee on any of Article 13, Section... Jonna, you have a question?
Hi, I just have a question that's twofold. A lot of these electronic things become outdated very quickly. Is that something that we have to take into consideration before we spend the money? And then my second part of the question is, there are groups out there that want to get rid of everything with electricity. Is this going to factor in at all? Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to worry about, and I think you're thinking like the technology itself, is that the technology, sorry, Mark, the technology literally, I hate to say it this way, the day we order it, it's like taking the car off the parking lot, you're already behind. However, our typical lifespan for our Chromebooks is around 4 years, and that's pretty average in public education. And that's just because of the wear and tear, but also, for example, new stuff comes out and that Chromebook hasn't been updated. The other part that's important is, yes, with all of that environmental stuff that's taking place, we find ourselves in public education ahead of the curve in some ways and behind the curve in other ways. And part of it is because of our buildings, right? The buildings can only take so much. So if you have a building that only has a certain amount of outlets and only can take up so much voltage, that's what we have to work with.
All right, well, I just have one little quick comment. It's with levity I'm saying this. I know that if kids had to pay for them themselves, this wouldn't be happening, so maybe we should think about that. I'm only kidding, though.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 13?
I do.
Dave, you have a question or comment?
I do. Thank you, Vaughn.
You're very welcome.
Through you, and thank you, Dr. Bayetta and is it Kathleen? Catherine, I'm sorry, Catherine and Heidi. I was also very encouraged and pleased to see that there's going to be a capital plan put together. So I'm also, in favor of a needs assessment. I'm just curious about how it's going to work. So I know that the municipal side has a 4-year capital plan. You're coming out with like a 5-year one? And if you have a 5-year one, how does that dovetail in with an existing 4-year plan? Is it going to be 9 years? Is it going to be somehow stacked up, where multiple projects stacked up on top of each other? How does that integration happen?
Yeah, so you're really looking on our side at a 10-year because of how big we are and how many of the items that we have. And so, for example, let's say that there was discussions that came in around roofs. This is a bad example, but I'm just saying that. That actually might not be a traditional capital. That actually might be an MSBA accelerated repair. So we would go out and say 5 years from now, we would want to be looking at some type of a MSBA project, even though it would show on our capital needs, it wouldn't necessarily come from traditional capital funding unless, instead of borrowing the amount, we were using the capital funding to pay for it because there was a 52% grant or whatever from MSBA. My prior experience is, and I'll defer to Mark who's here, but traditionally because our projects are so significant, they have a tendency to be a little larger because of the age of the buildings and because things weren't done consistently. Our goal is to try to say, in working with the town, what are the priorities over the next 4 years? And that's where I think Mark comes in, I come in, the town manager, the two boards, and really take a look and say, where are we going to be spending the funds over the next 4 years? And so mine might go out further because it can, but I think we should take advantage of that as part of going out for this capital needs.
If I could just add to the idea behind where the 4-year came from. Previous town manager is required by the charter for a 3-year capital plan. Most capital plans are 5-year capital plans. So I think they just picked the compromise in the middle of the 4-year, and that's where the 4 came from. Moving forward this year, everybody's used to a 5-year plan. It's just a nice number to work with, right? A 5-year. So we're going to go with a 5-year moving forward, and it'll blend in perfectly with their capital plan.
Do you mind if I add? I just wanted to add, if that's okay, the capital needs assessment is going to identify, so for instance, if they look at the boilers and the make, model, how old they are, what's the average lifespan. So the capital needs assessment will put into perspective the roofs, the windows, the boilers, air conditioning, et cetera, plumbing, whatever it is. And for the plant assets, it's the building and the grounds to an extent. And that's really going to identify what is the average lifespan. And in this report that we will get, they will estimate what the cost would be, probably with some sort of escalator. This is what the business they work in. So they have all those market prices, and based on the square footage, anybody's welcome to see a copy of this if they want. On this quote is the square footage of each building, and that's how they really price it out for the work that they're going to do. The capital needs will identify over 5-10 years if all things were going to be replaced in the average life cycle. This is the year they would need to be replaced. That is not necessarily the town's capital plan. It will inform the town and the school working together. Here's what we're looking at. This might be the year that such and such needs to be done. The town will look at what your needs are in all the other buildings and determine how you're going to jockey that information around and say, okay, the boilers might go at the whatever school in such and such a year, but we're going to try and get another year out of it. And then if we have a 10-year one, it sets you up for a rolling, which is, you know, what districts and schools usually do, a rolling 5-year plan. So each year as something falls off, if what was identified as this vendor is, say, in, you know, year 1, and we didn't have to replace it, and you had other needs in all the other town buildings, I'm sure there'll be some, and you decide not to do that, it would just bump it, the whole plan up a year is typically how it's done. You know, things happen.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I think through Vaughn is that the nature of the question was about overlapping costs in year 1, for example. If the capital plan on the municipal side came out, and let's just pick a number like $1 million, and your capital plan says in the first year it's $2 million, that means we have a $3 million capital plan in year 1. Apparently, it's not like you're waiting until 4 years runs out and then, oh, we're in year 5, we can now start the school capital plan. It's not real. That's not real that it would happen like that, right?
It would be incorporated with whatever the town has prepared on the town side, and just incorporate the two together as the town and school working together sees fit, however that is. Typically, and Biz would speak more to this, I'm sure, and the treasurer, it's really looking at what, generally, I mean, other places I can't speak to here, generally looking at what's on your debt schedule and trying to smooth out the costs for the taxpayers over time. So if there was a roof, for instance, and it was a couple $1 million, and that was the year that the town put it on, you would look at what other things might be held off, and vice versa. If there was some significant things for other town buildings, and you look at the schools, you might say, we'll do this small thing, or we're not doing anything on the schools this year. That needs to be pushed out to another year. So ultimately, it's really giving the information for the committees and the boards and the taxpayers to prioritize it, you know, just feathering it all in together into one big mixing bowl, so to speak, and the town would determine what they wanted to carry for a debt schedule and do in what order. And we would just be providing information through this process.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Now, this is, well, hang on one moment. I have a point of personal privilege that I want to ask, if it's okay with you, because instead of having the school come back tomorrow, which it might fit more neatly into the whole thing, is that I wanted to ask a question about the budget, if that's okay with...
Is this relative to Article 13?
That's why I'm asking for a point of personal privilege. If it's okay with you, I just had a simple question. I think it could be answered pretty quick. I just wanted to know on the Student Opportunity Act, when does that expire?
That's a great question, Dave. It's a 7-year process, so we have, I believe it's going to be 2 more after the coming year.
Thank you for that, Dr. Bayetta. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 13, Section A, telephone system replacements at various schools? You have a question on second? Yes, Lisa.
I would just like to follow up on what our petitioner, I don't know what you want to call her, said. She mentioned debt service. I just would like to put it in people's brains. And also the capital plan will also help us devise a savings plan for these items as well. I love the word savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 13, Section A, telephone system replacements at various schools. Hearing none. Any questions, comments from the committee? Article 13, Section B, complete HVAC services, electrical work at the Daw School. Hearing none. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 13, Section C, grades K through 5, charging carts for Chromebooks. Hearing none. Questions or comments from the committee? Article 13, Section D, capital needs assessment relative to all school buildings. Hearing none. I have a comment to make on Section D. I heard you several times say something to the effect of the schools and town working together on this. I really appreciate that. Everyone can work together on a capital plan. But I do have a question on that. Warrant, page 11, lists an amount of $120,000, $127.50. But the backup has a number of 102,750. I added up the numbers. The numbers really do come up to 102,750, but the warrant does have it at 120,750 for an $18,000 difference in there. Do we know what it should be? I mean, I know what it should be because it's 102,750. Is there a contingency built in there, or why is it off by $18,000, whereas there is not a contingency built in on some of the other ones? Biz?
We did build in a contingency on that because it is going to be variable once they start the project.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to be clear because I noticed there's two numbers flipped. I thought I would just bring it up. Okay, any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 13, Section D? Hearing none. Questions or comments from the public on Article 13? Please identify yourself for the record, Cynthia Walsh. Yes, she has a microphone.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Precinct 3. First, the adaptive listening device is not working, period. So I'd appreciate, not only should the mic be on, but you need to speak into it. If it's just at the side of your face, that doesn't help me at all. I made a lot of effort to come to the hearing in person. And it's really distressing if I can't hear what's going on. I want to second a previous speaker's praise for the town staff and especially the finance director for doing all the heavy lifting to find this money so that we could use it for the purposes of this article. Also, to a previous speaker, it's been a while since I was in the classroom, but the fact is that textbooks are extremely expensive. We're talking $100, $150 per book. Whatever we can put onto a Chromebook, because I mean, it is licensed and we do have to pay to take the information in a textbook and put it into the Chromebook, but it's immensely more cost effective to the poor taxpayer that we keep hearing about, that we make use of technology that's going to save us a good deal of money. So I thank the school department for making every effort to make that possible. And a previous speaker mentioned homes that don't have the technology. I'm sure that adapts, assessments provisions have been made for those students because that's true. It's true in my home. And I want to thank them for what they're doing because we have to be realistic. I enjoy a book, and certainly our library shows there's plenty of people in Stoughton that enjoy holding a real book. But the fact is that books, that's why so many people go to the library. I mean, a simple hardcover now is like $35 for a novel. So thank you for everyone who's working so hard to make sure that all those tax dollars that are in drawers all over town are being brought out of the drawers so that we can use them for a good purpose like these purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Cynthia. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 13, Section A, telephone system replacements at various schools. Section B, complete HVAC services, electrical work at Daw School. Section C, grades K through 5 charging carts for Chromebooks. Section D, capital needs assessment relative to all school buildings. Oh, you have a hand up? Oh, please step forward and identify yourself for the record. Sorry, I couldn't see you back there.
Thank you. Marina Ryans. I just have a question. Maybe I didn't hear everything, but telephone system replacement in various of schools and charging cards for, Chromebooks. Do you have a concrete estimate? Which school, which department, which school, which room, where exactly? Do you have concrete estimate that we can see how you came up to $368K? Thank you.
In response to the question through you, Mr. Chairman. When you look at the Chromebooks as in carts, there will be a quantity of 49 at a cost of $1,690 for a total request of the $82,810. In terms of the telephones, there are 9 1000i series 48 buttons LSS at $236.60 for $1954.08. 75 1000i series 4 lines for $11,769. 40 1000 series 6 lines for $1920. 40 8 lines for $10,399.60. 1 premium color IP phone for $771.28. The additional labor hours is $5,475. Total of $38,888.16. Those will be utilized in spaces that currently do not have them or replacing places that need to be replaced.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Bayetta. Did that answer your question? Yes? Okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments from the public? Article 13. Hearing none. Thank you very much, Dr. Bayetta. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Next on the agenda, we have Article 15, which is a petitioned article. South Elementary School project election petitioned article. Do we have a presenter for this?
Hi.
Please identify yourself and for the record. And
I'm Lori Jakes. I live at 6 Harris Circle, Precinct 3.
okay, would you like to present your petitioned article?
Thank you. My name is Lori Jakes. I'm a Stoughton resident, a taxpayer, and a parent of 2 daughters who attend South Elementary School. My daughter Libby is in 4th grade, and Sydney is a 1st grader. I have served as the president of the South Elementary School PTO and continue to be active and involved in that community. I am here this evening to ask town meeting, who supported a new elementary school project with 4 prior votes and voted overwhelmingly to support this project just last spring, to reaffirm their commitment and demonstrate to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, also known as the MSBA, that Stoughton will support this project. Because without this reaffirmation, it's quite possible this town won't see MSBA support for an elementary school or any other project in the foreseeable future. As the petitioner, I represent close to 2,000 Stoughton residents and taxpayers who, to date, have signed this petition. That number continues to grow every day with the support of many individuals. But tonight is not really about me or any of us who are here in support of this project. By the time the new school is built, most of us will no longer have elementary school-age children. This request is really about the future of elementary education for all Stoughton families and the value of education to our community. South Elementary School was built in 1958 as a first-class facility for that time, with 14 classrooms, administrative offices, and a cafetorium. In 1967, 6 regular classrooms, 2 special-purpose classrooms, a library, and a gymnasium were added to the building. Since that time, so in the last 57 years, there have been only 6 major renovations. They include replacing the asphalt, a partial roof replacement, a partial window replacement, and updates to the phone system. The capacity for this building stands at approximately 225 students without any space for the support services students need and use today. For context, the enrollment at the end of last school year was 317, far beyond the school's original design. So in its current state, South Elementary School is overcrowded and in dire condition. There is no longer a library, as it was turned into classrooms. Music happens on the stage of the cafetorium, sometimes during a lunch period. And band classes happened on the stage of the cafetorium, outside of the building, or in the teacher's lunchroom. Storage closets have been transitioned into office spaces, so a closet that once held art supplies is now a place where teachers interact with students. In one of the office/closets, you can see nails coming through the ceiling that are apparently needed for the roof. The current school was built and renovated prior to the American with Disabilities Act and is therefore not ADA compliant. If you've been in the school, one of the first things you will notice are 2 very steep ramps that someone in a wheelchair would need to maneuver to get from one floor to the next. You would then need to acknowledge that it would be almost impossible to do without assistance. These ramps have slopes that vary from 23 to 26%, well beyond the maximum limit allowed. In addition to the ramps, there is also a lift that goes between floors to the 2nd and 3rd grade wing. Imagine being a 2nd or 3rd grade student in a wheelchair, with the only way to get to this part of the building, from this part of the building to the cafetorium for lunch or the gym or anywhere else in the school and back, is to use the lift that exits into a classroom, thereby causing disruption anytime the student needs to move throughout the building. When it rains, like it did earlier this week, you can expect to walk through the school and see rain coming in through the ceiling and plexiglass windows into many of the classrooms and the gym in particular. I probably don't need to acknowledge the potential liability issues with the wet gym floor and children running around it may cause, but I will anyway. You look up at the ceiling tiles and you see brown water stains all over them. Imagine being a 3rd grader who walks into school on the first day of MCAS, walks into their classroom and learns they can't take the test at their desk because there was a rainstorm and water is leaking all over it coming through the light fixture. This actually happened. Now, for those of you who don't know, 3rd grade is when MCAS are taken for the first time, and it can be very nerve-wracking for these students. So walking into this on the first morning of these important tests was no doubt stress-inducing for this child and probably affected how they performed. There's asbestos in the floor tiles, most likely mold throughout. I know Dr. Baeta has assured us that it has been tested and is well within the limits, but I also just heard from a parent last night, actually, about how they had to pick up their child from school to take them to the doctor for the 2nd time already this year because of their asthma. Maybe it's a coincidence. And finally, in this day and age where you never know when you will turn on the TV and hear of another school shooting, the South School lacks security. These are just a few examples of what is currently wrong with the school. A new elementary school would fix these issues and allow for an improved educational experience for our children. I know the proposed school design has been described as extravagant, but in fact it is not. It is simply designed to meet the modern needs for education and security in the 21st century and beyond, with the intention of lasting for at least the next 50 years and probably much longer. Moreover, the majority of the elements being described as extravagant have an educational function and are reimbursable by the MSBA, not paid for by the taxpayers. Elementary education today emphasizes STEM, project-based and collaborative learning, and face-to-face interaction. Things like breakout spaces, dedicated science labs, outdoor classroom space, and small group assembly are required components to meet MSBA's goals in funding excellence in education. In 2024, over 20% of our students are on some form of IEP and require support services that no one could have envisioned in a 1967 building. It would behoove us to take advantage of getting modern amenities for our students to thrive using the state's money to do so. Further, if we are unable to secure a debt exclusion necessary to fund this project, we will also lose an almost $48 million grant from the MSBA. Just so we are all on the same page, this is free money. The MSBA would take that money that has already been collected and reserved for Stoughton and put it towards another school in another town. We would then need to be invited by the MSBA to submit another statement of interest. At the very least, it would be another 5 years before this would happen, if at all. And in that 5 years, construction costs will continue to rise, increasing the amount of the money needed to construct a new building. But there is also no guarantee that we would ever be invited back, and this would cause major ramifications for future school building projects, including the O'Donnell Middle School. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to address the failed June 11th vote. The results of this election represented a very small subset of the voting population in Stoughton. From the time the MSBA formalized their support of this project to the day of the vote, there was not enough time to get the facts out, and voters were not only misled, but were also ill-informed on the cost, benefit, and the need for this project. Those in opposition to this project, and I'd go so far to say in opposition to anything that supports education, presented misinformation to the public. Among other things, this misinformation included a higher tax impact for taxpayers, and also suggested that by voting no, taxes would not increase. Make no mistake, there is a cost in the very near future for Stoughton's elementary school buildings, and it is significant. The question is whether we want to take advantage of money that MSBA has already set aside for Stoughton, or bear that cost without MSBA funding and regret the choice in future years when we inevitably learn that our patchwork solution didn't correct the problem. By not allowing a revote and moving forward with the current failed debt exclusion, we will lose almost $48 million in funding. This is not a fiscally prudent decision, in my opinion. So who then will pay for these repairs? We will, the taxpayers, thereby increasing our taxes. And most likely the repairs to the South and Wilkins School will cost just as much as the cost of a new consolidated elementary school. I'm certainly not an expert, but in my opinion, South School's days are numbered. Is it possible to continue using it in the short term while a new building is being built? Yes, most likely. But for longer than 2+ years needed to build a new school? Probably not. At least not without significant repairs that, when all is said and done, are most likely not worth it. And if the decision is made to close South School, the 300+ students who attend the school at any given time will need to be redistricted and bused to other elementary schools in town. So now, instead of approximately 1,500 to 1,700 students spread throughout 5 elementary schools, they will be spread throughout only 4, causing at the very least significant capacity issues. But I expect these 4 schools are each already at capacity. That means substantial money will be needed to build and maintain modulars at these sites, creating a subpar solution for our students, and let me repeat, at the cost to the taxpayers. I'm here tonight not just as a parent, but also as a citizen who invested in this town, built a family here, and wanted nothing more than for Stoughton to prosper. I moved to Stoughton 11 years ago before I had children, but knowing that one day my children would be educated in the Stoughton public school system because I believe in public education. I am a product of public education. I also believe that all children deserve to have the best educational experience that we can offer them. Not only is it our civic duty, but as a town, we owe it to them to provide the best infrastructure to do this. And that is currently not happening at South School. And beyond that, I would ask each of you, what type of example do you want to set for future generations? One day, the children who are currently attending South School or any of our elementary schools will be the ones responsible for our town. They will be our town meeting reps, our select board members, and the taxpayers. Do we want them to look back at this time and think that we didn't care about them, their welfare, their experience, their education? I've spoken to many people about this project over the last couple of months, and those who know and or attended South School tell me it's been decades that something should have been done. Well, now I think it's time for us to come together as a community to rectify this problem. If for no other reason, do it for our precious children. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your petitioned article. John, do you have a question regarding this? Comment, thank you.
To the previous speaker, I like your point about students who eventually become town meeting reps. If you walk in the South School in the foyer there's on the left-hand side a series of painted tiles. They were painted in the 1960s. My late father painted 2 of them. He graduated from the South School, Peter Laboulier's class, grade 6. I think the year was The Man Walked on the Moon, 1969. I myself went to the South School, and when I went to the South School, I started in 1992, and back then we had great heat in the summer and great air conditioning in the wintertime, because the building's HVAC system sucked then. It sucks now. When I sat in lunch, it rained on my head, just like it does now to my daughter, who attends there. 3 generations, a school that is falling apart. We need a new one. The previous speaker speaks of a pipeline. I joined town meeting at 18 years old. My first vote was before I graduated high school. I have dedicated my life to this town and will continue to dedicate my life to this town. And we need a new elementary school.
Well, thank you for that. Joel, do you have a question or comment on this?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple technical questions, if I could.
Sure.
Mr. Coulter? Mr. Coulter, the article says to see if the town will move to request that the select board schedule an election. Has the select board actually taken this up to reschedule an election?
No, they have not.
Does the select board intend on taking this up?
They are taking input and advice from residents, and they will in due time take a vote.
So if this petitioned article doesn't pass, the select board could still vote?
If they choose, yes.
If they choose to schedule a new election?
Correct.
Okay.
I want to make it clear, they have not deliberated for 2 minutes on this matter. They are waiting for the outcome of town meeting.
I'm sorry, what?
They have not deliberated for 2 minutes on whether they should, could, or would call for another vote. They are waiting to hear the deliberation of town meeting.
So the select board is waiting for the results of this article before they make any action?
Oh, they're waiting for input from town meeting members who represent all the citizens of this town. We're getting input every day, sir.
No, that I understand. My question is, if this article passes, does that mean that the select board is forced to take a vote?
No, it means it will be a piece of information needed for them to make an informed vote. We get input in all different ways. This will be input we'll get in this way. I will present it all to the board. They will consider it, and they will cast a vote or not cast a vote based upon that input. People want to suggest, in fact, the selectmen, now that you've asked, sir, have received a threat of a recall should they call this for a vote. They're not intimidated by that at all. They're just looking for input from our citizens right up to the last day where they have to make a decision. I think that's what you'd expect of our elected bodies.
Is it your understanding, and you may not be able to answer this question, but if the select board decides to do it again, revote, would it be part of the April town election, or
Yes,
would
sir,
it be part of a separate election?
It would be a part of the town election.
All right, so if this passes and the select board agrees with this, there will be no additional cost to the town.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wolk. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Mark?
If the select board does take this up and votes to have another vote on this, what would be the cost if it wasn't on April 1st? If they have a separate date like they did the other time?
Yes, Mr.
The
Calder.
cost of the last special election was approximately $38,000.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Lisa?
Hi, good evening. How are you? Let me just start out by saying I understand how upset you and all your related yes voters feel. I just want to let you know there is a massive amount of taxpayers, as evidenced by one of the highest voter turnouts in the June 11th election, deciding that the taxpayers want a reasonable, practical design built, and they want the school to start having a savings plan for all the years, I believe you said since 1967, there's numerous year over year with no savings plan, knowing that the South School could either be rebuilt or repaired. With that being said, to your point earlier about misinformation, I just wanted to ask you, you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said you believe, or yes, voters believe, that the rate that was used by the no voters was wrong. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correctly, yes.
Okay. And then the other misinformation concern is you believe the no voters expressed that there would be no new taxes? Was that your other?
Yes, that is.
Okay. And then my final question is, was there any other points of misinformation? Or believed misinformation? Let me clarify.
Yes, there is mischaracterization of the project cost, lying about the building components, lying about how certain parts of the project were not included in the estimate, and then misinformation about the ability to repair the current South School.
Okay, so I'm not aware of anybody talking about a repair cost on the no side, so maybe you can clarify that at a later date. And then you said on building components, what components were incorrect?
Such as some of the road improvements that were not included, other aspects of the building.
That's what I'm curious as to what other points of misinformation. You said the road, one thing that I do remember hearing is that there's only one fully functioning entrance into the school, and for safety reasons, there should really be two, and I know they had an emergency entrance to that point. So I was just curious, what other road misinformation did you think? Are you okay?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay.
On the misinformation, I read 10 points. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me. I'm going to stop.
I couldn't bear this, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
Excuse me. Please identify yourself for the record before you answer anything.
Absolutely. TJ Recupero, I'm chair of the School Building Committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be very brief. I read a petition or circulation today with 10 points, several of which were misinformation. And the one about the only one functional entrance and exit was absolutely bizarre. We have two primary entrances. You walk in the front, you walk right out the back.
I'm talking about the roadway. There's only one fully functioning entrance into the school. That would be on Park Street. The emergency would have been on Haynes Road.
Right.
That's what we're referring to.
Right. There are two. I apologize. When you say...
Thank you. I appreciate that.
When you say entrances to the building, I couldn't believe I was reading that. But that should be clarified, because the way it's worded is there was only one functional entrance to the project. People read that as building. There are 9
Stoughton residents have
entrances.
common sense.
I read it. I read it, and I have common sense, and I read that as building. Yes, there's only one entrance in. There's only one to the high school, by the way. There's a circulation plan for the high school. You drive in, you circulate, you come out.
Through you, we're speaking of the South School right now, correct?
I know that, but I'm saying that's not so uncommon.
I'm well aware of what article we're speaking of, but thank you for the reminder.
I can run through other misinformation, but I don't want to belabor the point. There was what I saw today was rife with misinformation, but over the course of the campaign, there was misinformation constantly. And that was a campaign. Look, every campaign has that. I appreciate that. But were 14, now there's 15 members of the school building committee who dedicated hundreds of hours on this project. If you have questions, we've always invited them, always. I don't think it does the town service, certainly not the project, if we let misinformation stand without challenge, for one, and second of all, sit idle when we have an opportunity over the next 6 months. Town manager said that this is hopefully scheduled for the April town election. If that's the case, there are 6 months to fully educate the public. If then the public decides that they still don't want a South School, as Mrs. Jake said, there's a cost to that.
Other questions or comments on the article?
I'm fine. I just wanted to get on the record what they thought misinformation was.
Do you have any other questions or comments on the article, though?
I do not at this time.
Thank you. Arnie, do you have any questions or comments on the article? Article 15. Do you have a microphone, Arnie?
I apologize.
I'm so sorry.
Apologies. In the amount column, there's no number there. What is it? Could you specify that, please?
There's no dollar amount. My understanding is there's no dollar amount because this is a petition article to request the select board schedule an election to be held as may be deemed appropriate to the select board. There was no dollar amount. Maybe they didn't have a dollar
The
amount.
voters of this town, if this is passed, will be voting for a debt exclusion, and they would like to know what the amount is that they're going to be voting for.
Well, my reading of it, this is a petition article to see if the town will move to request that the select board schedule an election to be held as may be deemed appropriate to the select board, so the town may vote whether to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on borrowing from the limitations of taxes posed by MGL 5921C, Proposition 2.5, relative to the South Elementary School project approved in Article 1 of the 2024 special town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto. I'm guessing there's no dollar amount because it's just a request to the select board to schedule an election.
So if you're going to schedule an election and we don't know what we're voting for, what's going on with that? Every other petition seems to have a dollar amount in it.
The petition is to request the select board. I'm just telling you what my reading of it.
Well,
It was said by
I
Mr.
believe that's
Carlton.
incorrect. We should know what we're going to be voting for.
So
We would be voting, yes, Carolyn.
I have a question or a comment. I do not believe that town meeting can command the Board of Selectmen to do anything. Am I correct? So there's no cost to this article. It's a motion. It's basically it's giving town meeting is saying that we will either support the selectmen, we would like a new election, or we would not like a new election. The selectmen, we're not commanding the selectmen to hold an election, so there's no cost. Since there's no cost to our article, there would be no cost. Yeah, there's going to be no cost on this article because we're not paying any money.
If this election passes and we get a yes vote, and they say we want to build a school, there's a cost to the town. The town should be able to know exactly what they're voting for. If that school is going to be $214 million for a debt exclusion, they need to know that. And then you get your MSBA grant, which will reduce the debt.
Oh, I agree.
But if we don't know what
We're
the
not going to have a
amount,
lot of cross debate here.
I agree. I'm saying this article isn't the debt exclusion. So there's no cost to this article because it's just a request for town meeting to take a vote to say whether or not they would like the selectmen to hold an election. It's not compelling the selectmen to hold an election, but it's giving our opinion of it. There's no cost to that, which is why there's no cost to the petitioner's article.
Excuse me.
The article is not passing a South School. The article is not to build the South School. The article is to request the select board to schedule an election, to Carolyn's point.
I'd like to interject if I can, Ron. If I can, because I think we're getting off track.
We definitely are getting off track. That's why I'm reminding everyone.
This discussion can be saved for when we're closing the public hearing and we deliberate and make our vote on these things. It doesn't have to take place between us because we will be having a robust discussion about this. This just isn't the forum for it. The public hearing is to ask questions of a petitioner, and that's pretty much it. So I don't believe we need to get into a debate about it.
I've made my point. I withdraw the question.
No, it's not. The question is exactly what you should be asking. It's whether or not we're debating the question. That's my point.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the committee on Article 15, a petitioned article? Yes, Dave.
No, I'll defer to Jonna.
Jonna, you have a question on this?
Yes, please. I wanted to ask the petitioner a couple of questions. You said there was misinformation. I feel there was misinformation. Is the school presently unsafe?
The article is not saying the school is unsafe.
Yes, but the petitioner is saying that the school's unsafe. I've heard that there's asbestos and all kinds of issues. Is it unsafe presently at this moment?
As I mentioned, Dr. Baeta has informed us that everything is within the limitations.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I also wanted to know, you said, I've heard this idle threat before, and it really gets under my skin, and I speak to other people, and they feel this way, so that's why I'm bringing this up. How do you know that the MSBA will never give us money again? What are you basing that on?
Mr. Coulter, I think, had his hand up, and he probably has something to tell us.
You can, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. I'm the one that had the discussion with the governor's office and with the MSBA.
Oh, yes, yes. That's
They extended it to our election day and made it very clear that if changes were made to this project or if it was voted down, then we would wait in line for approximately 4 to 6 years for any more funding, which would mean that kids would be in a classroom in a new school in as far as 10 years from now. So I spoke to the MSBA and I got it from them personally. If we're not going to use this money, there's towns waiting in line for this money. The next will just come to the front of the line and we'll go to the back of the line.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Coulter. Dr. Baeta, did you have your hand up?
I wasn't done, but I wasn't done.
Do you have another question, Jonna?
Yes.
Okay.
I lost my place. I'll have to come back to it because I lost my place. Sorry.
Arnie, do you have a question on this?
Yes, I'm directing this to Dr. Bayeda. Did you, okay.
Well, keep in mind, Dr. Bayetta is not the petitioner for this article. I mean, if Dr. Bayetta is all right about answering a question, are you?
Did you give written authorization to start the working group from the school district?
The working group is not relevant to Article 15.
I'm just asking if,
Whether or not, Dr. Bayetta, that is, thank you for being willing to answer, but that's outside the scope of this article. We're not going to go further down the road than we need to.
very good. Well, I'll bring that up at another meeting.
The working group? Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 15? Dave, you have a question on this?
Oh, do you want to wait for my question?
Well, John, did you remember it?
Do you want to just wrap up, or do you want me to?
You can go ahead.
You want
it's
me to
fine.
go?
No worries.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lori, for coming before us. I know it's a big thing that you're taking on. I know you have a lot of responsibilities for your school district, and I respect that. It wasn't too long ago that I actually ran a campaign. I was running for office, and I made that one of this. There's two pieces to the centerpiece of what I was running for. One was the South School, the other was the Railroad Depot, and I did video campaigns, the whole thing. And because I cared very much about making sure that the children had a decent classrooms to do their work in. Okay, so I completely respect your motivation of everything you're doing. Okay, so I think what I want to do is try to bring it to a place in which we're not in contention between yes and no, that the whole town could get behind something. And I just want to make sure that as I say this, that this is something that's acceptable from your point of view. It's just more or less an opinion, and I know you can't represent thousands of people you've got signatures on. But if the town was able to afford a new school that was clean, safe, maybe a 20th century education. I know I'm a product of a 20th century kind of building. It was a rectangle-shaped building. But they were able to teach me reading, writing, arithmetic, some sciences, and the fundamentals were learned from when I was 5 years old through 10 years old before I got to middle school.
Is there a question here somewhere, Dave?
Fawn, if you can please give me a chance, okay? I'm trying to bring this to a place in which I think could solve a lot. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm trying. Okay? If the town was able to afford a modest school that addressed the South School, not the Wilkins School, but a school that made the children, gave them a safe space to learn in, and gave them the fundamentals that a K through 5, many parents like to see fundamentals taught in the classroom, that if it was able to be funded within the budget and not have to go to a town-wide debt exclusion or debt override kind of thing, would that be acceptable to you?
Can I say sure first? I'm good at this. I am not an educator. I am not a teacher. I am a parent, and as a parent, I want the best thing that my children can get from the school system. I'm putting all of my eggs into that basket, that the teachers who teach them every day are doing it based on the expertise that they have. It is not my place to sit here and tell you what type of school is best. I am not the expert. I am not the expert. Just whereas I would expect no one to come to my job and tell me how to do my job, I'm not going to do that to them. So if they tell me, if I'm told, if there's a school building committee that tells me that this is the best school for our town, for our children, for 21st century education, then I'm going to support what they say to me.
I was looking for your opinion as a parent of children in the South School who desire to have a safe place for their children to learn in. would the fundament for you, for the children, and I'm asking your personal opinion. I'm not asking you to to supplant the authorities of the experts. I'm saying, as a parent, would you be satisfied with the fundamentals that we used to get when we were back in the 20th century?
No, I would not.
You would not. So
No, I
it's
would
not
not.
enough
No.
for K through 5 children to learn the way that people were learned in rectangle-shaped buildings.
I went to elementary school in the late 70s. No, that is not acceptable. That is, as a parent, that is not at all acceptable to me. I work in education, so I see what happens, but no. I don't, no, that is not acceptable at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, just briefly as a
Yes, Mr. Calder.
As a practical matter, I want to point out to Dave and others, that very question, which is a fair question, is one of the primary drivers behind my organizing that independent working group. It needs to be known, and it wasn't at the time. If we modify the current plan, we go to the back of the line. So even if Laurie answered yes to that question, I would accept that. It means we don't see any money from MSBA for at least 5 years, if not longer. So that's the sort of information that has to get out to our public, that a no has ramifications, that redesign has ramifications. And if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, answer the question that the superintendent was far too classy to answer. I formed the working committee, and I have enormous respect for the superintendent, but as Joe will agree, I don't report to the superintendent, so I did not ask for his permission. I didn't want any side, either side, to influence that working committee, and that's why I did not seek permission, and I wasn't required to seek permission to form a working group. I've got more than a dozen working groups that are currently active on issues facing this town. That is just one of them. Thank you, though.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Calder.
My question had to do with about the financing of the school.
She
in a way,
answered that. You asked
correct,
the question.
I
she
did.
answered it. So, do we have any other questions or comments on Article 15? Diane, you have a question? Let's hear it.
Actually, my first question, is this on?
Yes, make sure you speak nice and loud so everyone at home can hear.
As a cheerleading coach, you don't want me to speak that loud. Did they? That's okay. They know me anyhow. To Mr. Coulter, one of the suggestions that you made was to have people notify the select board of their decision, yes or no? How would you...
Of their opinions.
We're being broadcast here. How could they do that?
I was notified today that the email we set up to write in questions and give opinions wasn't working today, so Trish, I believe, fixed it. So there is an email online. It's on my website, on my Facebook, that citizens can write in with their opinions and with their questions. And we strongly encourage that. And every question and opinion that's provided to that is provided in a weekly format to the board every week.
Okay.
And they will
do you think
collect
you
all
could
the
give that to Mr. Mullen so he could send it out to all the
I'd be happy
precinct
to.
people?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's a great idea, Diane.
Okay. Okay. My second comment is to TJ, because with true transparency, I am on the South Building Committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, TJ, but I believe the fire chief came and told us that if, God forbid, we had to get kids out of that new school building, they still could go down Fano Drive. Is that correct?
I don't want to speak for the fire chief, of course, but you remember it as I do. The fire chief essentially said, if there's an emergency, they're going to get out however the hell they need to get out, and Fano Drive is an option.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on Article 15, which is a petitioned article that's requesting the Select Board to schedule an election? Heidi.
Hi, Tucker. I want to thank you for coming and bringing this petition forward. I know this is not your first presentation, so first I want to say thank you, and thank you for all the time and effort that you've put into this with numerous other people. I've been in the South School. My kids don't go to the South School. They went to the Wilkins, which apparently isn't much better than the South School. And, they've done a lot of things to it in the last couple years through grants, et cetera. And I've been in there and it looks a lot better than when my kids went there. Schools are not built the same way they were like 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. And I think we're all aware of that. I live right next to the high school, and I remember seeing the original high school building. And I remember my babysitters telling me how horrible that building was. I've been in that section. I've been in the rebuild section, and even that was different than the other one. If we're going to have 21st century buildings for 21st century learners, we need to keep up with them, and we need to keep up with their pace. I remember when I was in 4th grade, two of the teachers did this co-teaching thing. It was this new thing that, people started doing, which is now very common. And they did not have the facilities in the room to be able to do everything that they wanted to do, so they had to make modifications. Our kids don't learn the same way that we did. I just was at conferences today and I was looking around the classroom. And it doesn't look the same as when I went to school. And that's a good thing. What's going on with this? That means, sorry, Cynthia, that means that our kids are being able to keep up with the changes that are going on. Can I have somebody else's mic? Thank you. The changes that are going on. The South School does not fit any of that at all. When I went to the open house several years ago, I remember pushing the windows in because they're plexiglass. That's not safe. I remember seeing all of the stain marks in the ceiling. I remember being in the library specifically, and the rooms on the east side of the school where water was just coming in. The building looked cool, like in the 60s. It was kind of Frank Lloyd Wright-esque, but it's not. So it does need to change. It does need to go to another vote. I think that there was so much misinformation about what was going to happen with the vote, because ultimately, it must just be me, ultimately, if we don't take this $48 million grant from the MSBA, we are going to be paying more. And I don't want to be paying more. If we have an opportunity for a grant for money, I think that we should be using that, because I like to save money.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Carolyn, you have a question on this? Article 15, which is to request a select board to schedule an election.
More.
Thank you.
All right. I think there's been a lot of talk about misinformation. I don't want to get arguing all the details of what was said in June about but the most obvious piece of information that was not out there for a variety of reasons is that what happens to the South School now if we do not build a new one? It cannot stay open indefinitely. It's, the petitioner already said that it's above its capacity. That's not going to change, and this is an issue that affects all of the elementary schools. One of the previous speakers has claimed to speak for taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer. I would like to see a revote of this issue. I would like to see a rational discussion of this, because all else fails, in my opinion, the South School is going to have to close. So we either do something or it's going to happen before, the decision's going to be taken away from us.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 15? John, did you remember what you were going to ask?
Thank you, Vaughn. I've been hearing that it's lived out its capacity, the South School, and it will be more to fix it or do repairs. What is this being based on?
Did you have an answer? Please, please identify yourself for the record.
I have an answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. TJ Recupero, I'm chair of the South School.
Yeah, make sure the mic's on so everyone can hear you.
It's a new mic here, too. TJ Recupero, I am chair of the school building committee, also, of course, a resident. It's based on we have to study a full range of options, addition, renovation, several new school options, several addition renovation options, and also base repair. Base repair means just taking what you have, bringing it up to code, making it air and water tight. And then I think you heard the stories of why it's not watertight for sure. So if you have an option of base repair, the estimates were that, two estimates for that came out to $35 million. $35 million from two independent cost estimators, one provided by the architect, one provided by the OPM, and they reconciled the differences, came up with an amount of 35, closer to 36, but let's call it 35 million because there's change in there. You add in about 15% of soft costs, designer, project management, insurance, contingency, comes to about $50 million just for base repair. In order to make that building ADA compliant, you would need to increase the size of the bathrooms, increase some of the doorways. You would lose space from classrooms. So in the end, you would get less of a building, fewer classrooms, at not so far off of the cost, 50 million versus, in this case, 60 million, but again, 5% of that is contingency on the school project. So those are based on real numbers. You mentioned, I think this gentleman mentioned that the South School had the best air conditioning in the winter and the best heating in the summer. HVAC was estimated in those estimates at $3 million to replace the HVAC. Of course, MSBA does have a accelerated repair program where we could get funds for that, but that doesn't matter. The Architectural Access Board regulations say that when you spend on the building 30% of the total building value, that building is assessed now at $3.88 million. 30% of that comes out to about $1.2 million. HVAC costs $3 million. As soon as you do HVAC repair, you have to make the entire building ADA compliant, a full base repair. So a $3 million HVAC project turns into a $50 million base repair like that. That goes for the roof, which was about, if I remember correctly, and I apologize, I can pull this out if you care, but about 1.7 million. Windows was 1.4 million. Any one of those components to do. And by the way, you can't do it piecemeal either. You can't do a $300,000 project now, a $700,000. It's the aggregate over a 3-year period. So if we want to do little pieces of it over a 3-year period, and that adds up to 30% of the assessed value of that building, we have to make the full building ADA compliant, which automatically turns, in this case, a $3 million HVAC repair into a $50 million project. That's the number.
Thank you very much for that, TJ. Any other questions or comments from the committee? From Article 15, I want to get to the public at some point, too. So, Joel, do you have a question on this?
Not so much a question, but some clarifications. Perhaps you and Dave could help me on this. We're not re-voting whether or not to build a new school. I think that's been voted already.
That's correct.
Okay? What we are voting on here is an article to compel, I shouldn't say compel,
To request.
request that the select board do a second election for the debt exclusion.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That's correct also.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so that if the voters wanted to know what the cost of the project was, all they had to do was go to the approved article in town meeting, which would actually say what the cost of the project was.
The motion, excuse me, the motion actually says imposed MGL Prop 2.5 relative to the South Elementary School project approved in Article 1 of the 2024 special town meeting, or take any other action there too. So it's
already been established.
It's established in the motion.
Because it says the South Elementary.
Sure, I was clear on
Yeah, it says it's approved
That's
in
why
Article
I
1.
think they assigned it, was because it has a financial, it's regurgitating the old special, but it's still.
I asked a member of the Rules Committee why we got this. And maybe there's a
Would you
member of
like
the
me
Rules
to
Committee here
respond?
that would be great, thank you.
Okay. We actually did this just in case they decided on a different day to hold this election, and if it did, it would cost the 38.
That I agree.
Okay.
So that's the reason the Rules Committee assigned it to the Finance Committee. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 15? Lisa?
So I just have a quick comment to the petitioner through you, Vaughn. So I heard you answer, and I just want to make sure I understand your answer. So your position is you have an all or nothing mentality. It's this school, this design, or nothing for the South School students. Did I understand that correctly?
We actually have no say in what the building is, because according to the MSBA, we need to move forward with the current project as it stands. So I support that. Yes, I support that.
I hear you. Okay, thank you for your time.
Petitioner didn't design the building either. So any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 15. Dave, you have another question?
Yeah, just a real quick one. You mentioned 2,000 signatures. How many of them did the clerk's office validate?
When I turned in the petition, I believe it was 1,081 that I turned in with the petition at that time.
They didn't say how many they validated?
I don't have that information off the top of my head, no.
Mr. Laurie, did you say they submitted 2,000 signatures?
That's what the petitioner said in the
No.
presentation.
I said that there have been 2,000 people who have signed the petition.
And my own
Close to
question was
2,000 people.
how many were certified signatures was the question.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 15, a petitioned article. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 15, a petitioned article? It is to see if the town will request the select board schedule an election. Please step forward and identify yourself for the record. Yes, Eddie. Yeah, just make sure you identify yourself for the record so everyone at home knows who you are.
My name is Ed DeFelice, Precinct 6. I've lived in this town for 80 years, believe it or not. And I just want to make one quick remark before getting into the questions. In all that time, I have participated on the planning board, Board of Selectmen, et cetera, et cetera. So I've kind of seen a lot of meetings, how they're conducted. I have never seen, in all those years, the back and forth of people accusing each other of misinformation or lying. That has no, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that has no place in a civil town. I mean, I know we hear that nationally every day, and it's sickening. There's no need for that. That's just my comment. The other thing, I thought, and I am obviously one of the people that are on a fixed budget, and that's kind of part of the question here. There's a lot of people involved that said no. because they're on a fixed budget. I'm on a fixed budget, and there's a lot of other people that are too. So it makes you look at things a little differently. It makes you look at things. It's trying to find out what's more cost effective. How can we save money? You know, and I thought at the results of the previous election. That it was, I saw it as one basic thing, and it seems to be like all over the place now. I saw that election as a request not to not have a school. You know, we all know that, you know, and while I've been here in this town, we built a ton of schools. All the schools have been referenced. And I think most of them were built without any kind of an override. I think back in the day, I think they did it within the budget. I guess we can't do it today. But I came in with the thought that the new committee would look at reducing the cost. I'm not going to say by how much, but a substantial amount. But it was not to say that none of us wanted a school, a new school. So I think it came down to the cost, and that I think was most people that did vote no. That's why they voted no. You know, I just see a lot of division here, and again we see that nationally, and it's not good. It's not good. We're a small town. I've never seen that. I mean, we've had all these different elections and stuff, but I think we got to be a little more civil. We have to respect. I know, ma'am, you mentioned a subset of people. Could you tell me what that meant? I picked up on that word. I didn't know what that meant. I'm sorry. Yeah.
What I meant by that was that there was a small number of voters in the grand scheme of things, a subset, who voted in this election. It was not an overarching majority of voters who voted in this election. 23% of voters voted in this election.
I think the comment was to say that a
realize
small
that.
group of people voted. That was what I interpreted.
I realize that. However, again, being here for so many years, that's a lot. That's a big turnout for a non-national local, or a state election. In my recollection, we're usually down around 19%. So this was for the town of Stoughton, this was a big turnout. And I think there was like a 600 margin of votes. That's substantial. I'm not, I'm not trying to say that one side is wrong or not, but I think you have to kind of look at it and not have, and I mean this for both sides, you just can't have blinders on this. There's a lot, and maybe that subset, maybe it's people like me that are on a fixed income that are considered seniors. Don't like to be considered a senior, but it is what it is, right? So I guess I would say that, first of all, I think we got to be a little more civil with each other. I think when we have this kind of division, then you're going to get the two sides are going to be probably voting the same way they did, and they're going to be trying to get more people to vote in their way. And then what's the purpose? But thanks for letting me speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. I think you're right. Everyone should be a little more civil. Any other questions or comments? Dr. Baeta.
Joe Baeta, 239 Chemung Street. My comments are as a citizen of this community, not as your superintendent. It's one of the only times in my entire career I've been able to do this. I support the petition. I supported the project as a taxpayer. My good friend Ed DeFelice just said exactly what the problem with all of this is. No disrespect. This should never have come in front of the Finance Committee. And for the Rules Committee to say that it's because it could have been an election, the Finance Committee has supported an emergency meeting to pay for an election in the past. This is to continue the battle of blue and red in Stoughton. I ask you to take the high road and not even vote on this issue. You typically do not vote as a finance committee on non-financial obligations. Pure and simple. And let me just finish. You are not being asked to support a building project. You're being asked to allow for this to go to town meeting to then deliberate the next steps as piece of information for then the select board to decide what's going on. So for the rules committee to set this up, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but after 50 years of living in this town, I am tired, and I'll act like a gentleman, not say exactly what's in my head. That's one. Two, to my colleague who spoke earlier, no disrespect to my friends on the left and the right, your decision has already been made. Some of you led yes votes, and some of you led no votes. I don't know how you can actually ethically vote on this. That's my point. Now, as a person who stands here as an appointed official who happens to be a taxpayer, guess what? I get to have that option. I can't do it during the workday, but if I want to hold a sign, I can. If I want to sign a petition, I can. I just can't use anything from my workplace, which, by the way, that's exactly what I do. But this does not belong with this committee because it continues the exact problem, not with today's Stoughton, or I should say with today's Stoughton, with tomorrow's Stoughton if we continue down this road. And I have friends who voted no. I have friends who voted no that come to my home, that know my family, who I adore and care for. And I have people sitting in this very room that are no people that I have a great relationship with. I don't hate them. I don't dislike them. But for this to come to this committee is a joke.
Hang on, excuse me.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any other questions or comments from the public on Article 15?
Hang on, Vaughn. It's just for the record. Our committee was assigned an article, a petitioned article. We've seen them before. They come before our committee. They're automatically on the town meeting floor. We have to make a vote, and typically our tradition has been to refer to town meeting, and it's usually a unanimous vote. That's typically how it goes, but we have the prerogative. But our tradition has always been to refer to town meeting because we have to dispose of the article. We don't have a choice because it was assigned by rules. So I just want to make sure that the process is understood because we shouldn't be looking and analyzing how another committee made their decisions because they did make a decision.
That was a member of the public who said his opinion, so we're not going to question that either. Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record to speak on Article 15.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Precinct 3. I think I can beat everyone in the room. I was there when the South School opened. I was a sixth grader. I came back 9 years later and taught there. As a previous speaker said, my siblings went to that school, their children went to that school, and now their children are going to that school. So one of your members, his children are third-generation Walshes. My comment is we shouldn't be afraid of voting. I know I'm not the town historian, but I do have a long memory. And back in the 70s, the administration wanted a second middle school. It went to the voters and they said, no. Well, he wasn't going to give up. He came back. Again, there was a vote on a second middle school. And the answer again was no. And there isn't a second middle school. So we shouldn't be afraid of voting. People can change their minds. People are still going to come to the polls in April. And people have an opportunity to decide where their cash, their tax dollars go. And sometimes the answer is no. Most of the time, though, it's been yes.
Well, thank you very much, Cynthia, for your comments and for advocating for democracy. Do we have any other questions or comments from the public on Article 15? please step forward? And I think there's someone in the back, TJ. I'm just going to have them come up first. Just please step forward and identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Just make sure the mic's working.
Thank you very much. Marina Ryans. So I believe we can argue, which is okay. But at the bottom point is that we're trying to find the truth. And the truth is how we spend our tax-paid money. It's our money. We pay the taxes. And lately, the taxes are not law, and we're all kind of struggling in the high cost of living. So we just want to know whether the school, the design of the school, the cost of the school is actually reasonable. The question we're all asking each other, is it being spent reasonably, or is it, our money being overspent? Because money don't grow on the street. So as I remember it from last year, the design of the school, the final cost of the school is not law. So saying that the MSBA money is all we care about is not going to cover it, not even close. So the biggest portion of the school is going to be dumped, I'm sorry for using that expression, on taxpayers' shoulders. And we suffer enough. Seniors, people, big families, paying for other expenses. And we all know that utilities went up, water bills, sewers, everything else, and it keeps going up. So when is it going to stop? So as a taxpayer, I'm concerned that how much I pay, and I don't want to pay anything extra. So my question to the petitioner, do you have proposals, 1, 2, or more, for the repairs? Because we've heard maybes, we've heard 39,000 millions, but we didn't see any proposals. So Wilkinson was just repaired. Wilkinson is also old, so are we expecting to rebuild Wilkinson next year? So when is it going to end?
All right, thank you very much for that.
Thank
we have
you.
any other questions or comments from the public? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record. Or you want to, come on up. You want to form a line out there, that'd be great.
My name is Susan Sari. I live at 755 Park Street. And first of all, I want to tell you that was very, very well said. And I'm very impressed with everybody in this room. I want to thank you all for your service. I really appreciate it. And I'm very invigorated by all the input. And I want to say that I agree with what the last speaker said. We all want a new school. You'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to see that the South School is falling apart in every way. I've been a crossing guard here. I've grown to love Stoughton. I do not have a history here. I've only lived here for 5.5 years. But I am a fiscally responsible person. And like this gentleman said, we are on fixed incomes. And we are just stretched so thin. And a lot of it isn't about not having a school, and I love what he said back there too about, the arguing and the contention. We just don't need it. But I also feel a lot of interest, a lot of love for this community, and I just, and I've grown to love it, and my neighbors and my way of life here. And, but it just seems, and I don't think it's misinformation, we have built a beautiful new fire station, a gorgeous library, a magnificent high school. And I don't think that the South School needs to be a Taj Mahal. I'm just saying there are so many ways that we can be fiscally responsible and all agree and have all the things that your children need. Because I would want the same thing when I was younger for my kids, certainly. And that's what I want to say. And I also agree with we really need to get along somewhere in this world. And I don't really think anybody disagrees. I think it's a money issue. Like my niece just said to me, this isn't a red or a blue or a yes or a no. It is definitely a budget and a money issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments from the public on Article 15? Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Again, TJ Recupero. I'm a resident. I'm also the chair of the school building committee. And again, I'll be brief. So we're partners with the MSBA on this project. If you go in the high school, you look at the plaque, it says built by Town of Stoughton and the MSBA. We're true partners with the MSBA. The key to unlocking that $47 million is that we have to build according to their guidelines and according to their regulations. We can't build a box of classrooms and get that $47 million. Our plans go through a facilities subcommittee full of engineers, architects, all experts. They look for breakout spaces. They look for collaborative areas. They look for outdoor classrooms. They look for all these things that weren't built into a building in 1958, much less 1967. So you could build a square building. You could make it very simple. You could probably fit 31 classrooms, all the administration, all the support service areas. You could probably, it would be larger and larger the more you build out. You could build it for 300 students if you want to do that. It will be obsolete the day it's built. And what's more is you won't get that approved by MSBA because it's not what they're looking for. They're looking for this concept of the 21st century education. I'll confess I don't like that term because it's a catchphrase. What it means is collaborative learning. It means one-on-one teaching. It means face-to-face time with teachers and students. It means more support services. I think I heard 20% of kids are on an IEP. It means specialized classrooms. So all of these things that we envision in the buildings that we were educated in won't go into a building, a box of classrooms that you would build today. We have to comply with what MSBA requires us, and the payoff is we get a significant portion, 42% of the entire project cost in this case. And we're still, by the way, trying to find supplementary funding if we can. Difficult to do under MSBA regs, but we're still looking for it. We can find savings. Later in the project timeline, we weren't allowed to change the project now prior to the extension period. MSBA said don't change the project. But what they're concerned with is the educational programming. We can change the fields, we can change the landscaping, we can do things like that. As long as we don't touch that core component of educational programming, we can reduce costs at the edges outside and perhaps later in the project when we get approved. But I wanted to address that because I think there's this notion that we can do something smaller and that the average size K through 5 elementary school today is 620 students. This one is built for 500 or designed for 550 with a maximum capacity of 600. Even if we build this building, it's still smaller than what MSBA is building today. I think the smallest built in the last 5 years is 350 students. And that's the exception. That's only one of them. The average is 620. So I apologize for taking the time and so much time on the mic, and to Mrs. Jakes, whose article this is. I just think it's important for people to understand you can't just envision what you went to school in and think that we can build that today. We can, but we won't get MSBA money for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record.
Tough to get old. John Anzavino, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Rep, and I'm actually the chairman of this South School Independent Working Group. I'm in favor of the petition to try and get the board to put this back on the ballot. I believe the school really does need to be built. I'm not going to reiterate some of the previous speakers' comments. I agree with where they were headed. The working group is just starting into their deliberations on trying to get the comparisons of what might be. There's only two options. It's either the building that was proposed, the project, or what do you have to do if you don't do the building? And there's a cost to both, and there's going to be a significant cost. So if you don't want the project, that's fine, but money's going to be spent. A significant amount of money will still be spent to rectify the problem that we have with the South School. And if you're not going through the MSBA process, then that cost is going to be borne by the town's taxpayers. So you either put it fully in the budget. We don't have a revenue tree that is going to generate all this extra revenue you might need to put that in the budget. So keep in mind, if you have to add money for your budget to take care of debt and there's not revenues to cover it, you know where it comes from. You cut services. So think about what you might want to cut, because that would be the option to do it if you're just going to be putting more money into your budget. And I do support this. And there was a comment made earlier about no taxes, that there was a thing about no taxes. And that might have come from the fact that the group that was against the project was named No Taxes, Stoughton No Taxes. That was the name of the group. That might be where that information might have come from, based on the name of the group. Other than that, thank you for your time. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you
I have a question.
Hang on. I'm still in the process of thanking a member of the public. Thank you very much for
I
speaking.
have a question for the member of the public.
We're not going to have cross debate with the public when
It's
they
not a
make public
debate,
comment.
it's a question. Is the working group looking at the cost of putting the school entirely in the budget as an option, or is it not looking at that at all?
We're looking at many different things. As I said, we're just starting into our deliberations of trying to put this report together, and we're taking many things into consideration. I mean, basically, you have two options, right? You either build this project, or you take some other action, some alternatives to rectify the problem. And then part of that will be to see, all right, if you're going to do this in a certain fashion, it's going to cost this, that. That would be one of the things you'd look at, is if you're going to build it and put it just into your budget, that would probably, well, that will be part of it, because that's going to be part of the alternative, is if you just do it within the budget.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments on this, Mr. Anzavino.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We have any other questions or comments from the public? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record.
Hi, Allison Reddington, 46 Sullivan Road, Precinct 3. I just wanted to speak to a point that feels it was missed across some of the conversation about the school. Putting a new school out there that is not considering all aspects would obviously be a huge flaw. We talked a lot about the educational needs of the new building, but the safety part of the Taj Mahal looking building has not been explained, and I feel like that's really important to just make a note of. So some of the things that have been complained about are the fancy looking hallways and things like this. 2023, last year, was the highest school shooting record in history. 346 school shootings last year. Let that sink in for a second. 346. These were not problems that existed in the days that you guys all went to elementary schools or the days I went to elementary schools. This is now. So these curved hallways, the reason they're curved is so that shooters don't have a direct line to take out every child in the hall. And that's a terrible thing to have to think about, but that is real. And that is the reality that we as parents have to face sending our children to school. So I do want to make sure that we are putting all of the possible safety features in, no matter how fancy they may look. It doesn't mean that they're overpriced just because you don't understand why they're there. Ask the questions, but don't make the assumptions. It's very important that we consider safety as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 15. Hearing none, I guess we'll move on. Oh, do you have a... I was saying the public, yes. Do you have something?
Just out of curiosity, if this doesn't pass and it is put into the budget for the town, when you decide how you're going to get the money to pay for it, what services do you typically look at first to cut?
Well, it's a hypothetical, of course.
Mr. Coulter, do you want to answer this? Because this is not relative to Article 15, but if you want to...
It's 10 seconds. Okay. It's not relevant, of course, in that it's a hypothetical. I agree with you, Yvonne. But it would be the big departments. You can't cover that level of debt inside the levy limit by reducing one teacher or one policeman or one trash collector. There would be departments shut down. And if we come to that, then I'll report back. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, we've taken all the questions, comments from the committee, questions, comments from the public. Any other questions, comments? Article 15. Hearing none. Thank you very much for bringing this petition article forward. You did a great job here tonight presenting. And have a wonderful evening. We'll see you at town meeting. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have Article 10. Construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding. Do we have a presenter for this? I'm just giving them the opportunity to step forward and say, hi, I'm the presenter. I'm just trying to... Please identify... Oh, did you... is this a handout?
It's the backup information you guys got. I do apologize.
We already have this.
Yeah, I think I'm a couple short. I didn't realize how big your committee was.
There's no new information here. This is all the stuff we already have.
The only new thing is the picture on the back, really, and there's like the design.
This is new. No, that's new. That's in the backup.
It's not in. Oh, is it? It's on there. Oh, maybe it is in the backup. An extra copy then.
Okay, I have complete faith that Mr. Tisdale sent us everything. So. So please identify yourself for the record, and this is for Article 10, construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding.
All right,
This was the CPC or something?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Matt Koshan, Recreation Director. So Article 10, supplemental funding for the Halloran Park Multisport Court. So this article was voted on in annual town meeting of 2022. We did have significant delays in our design and permitting process. Obviously, since then, there's been a rapid rise in construction costs, inflationary. All of that work has been completed. All the permits are done. Design work is done. We went out to bid in March. Numbers came in obviously a lot higher than expected. So this is the supplemental funding. I did work with Representative Phillips. He did secure us $25,000 for this project, which will lessen the ask from the CPA. This project, again, it's taking the existing basketball court that's already at Halloran and just adding an additional basketball court next to it. It's going to be a post-tension concrete, which has proved that a lot of communities are going towards since it's been withstanding weather conditions, and over time it's actually a better cost effective than asphalt. And then the basketball courts would be surrounded by street hockey boards, adding a multi-sport court element to it. There will be no lights at this facility, and everything in the article from 2022, the project has stayed the same. It's just this supplemental funding that we need. That is all that I have, and be happy to answer any questions.
So to be clear, this is an article looking for supplemental funding for an article that was passed when?
2022 annual.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee on Article 10, construction of Halloran Multi-Sport Arena supplemental funding? Joel.
Is there anybody, this is going to be funded by the CPA?
Correct.
Is there anybody from the CPA here today?
There's two of them.
Could we have one of them?
We could probably have both of them come up here.
We'll take the best looking one.
They'll look for any. They'll look for any excuse to get out of their chair.
I'll take a shot at it.
Left the good-looking ones back home.
Could you tell me if this is going to be a cash article or is this going to be a bond article?
Cash. Cash.
Because one of your members just loves to come here and says, I got loads of cash at the CPC.
Still true, but it's cash out.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mark?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that on the handout that you have, there's a proposed motion that this article is exempt from the sunset bylaw, Article 70 of May 2023. Why would it be exempt from the bylaw?
Well, first of all, as you know, there's and we didn't know when we put this explanation together, there's an article coming up at town meeting which would redo the sunset bylaw.
Yeah, but that's if we vote to redo it.
Right. The CPA has its own sunset provisions, whereby any article that's approved, you have to sign either a grant agreement or a memorandum of understanding if it's a town project, which itself, in that article, there's an agreement. In the agreement, there is a clause which limits the project to being completed within 3 years, or at that point, if they need more time, they can apply to the CPC for an extension.
Okay.
So we have our own sunset provision.
Yeah,
That's why.
I knew that was part of that, which I like. I just want to make sure that we can get this moving forward and get it built. And I didn't like having a state in this saying that it's exempt from it. But you will have it in yours, in your agreement, I should say.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. Arnie, you have a question?
Yes. You mentioned that there's not going to be any lights in this new court. Are there lights anywhere in Halloran Park?
Yeah, so we have lights around the walk. We have lights around the walking track, so they go on at dusk and they shut off around like 9:30. And then we have a security light over by the playground, and then on the playground there's like 7 to 8 poles that light up as well.
Out of curiosity, what's the cost to add lights to this court so the kids can play at night?
I'm not sure, but I could get that cost.
I'm just wondering, this is something for the kids and to keep them busy. So, I mean, what is a guesstimate? I know we can't hold you to it.
I couldn't even give you a guesstimate. I don't know. This is not something I've looked into really.
It's just a curiosity question.
It's also another thing, out of respect for the neighborhood as well, not having lights.
Well, I think going off at 9:30 is a pretty reasonable time.
Yeah, and if that's something that we see there's a need for, we'll definitely look into that.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you very much for that, Arnie. Lisa, you have a question on this?
Yeah, hi, just real quick. So I'm just curious, is the Recreation Department you just blocked his head. Thank you. Is the Recreation Department just for children, or is it for children and adults in terms of?
Are you talking about like the Recreation Department or like this court?
The question relative to the court was, did you consider a pickleball scenario there? And then that's why I prefaced it with, do you do recreation or plan recreation for any seniors in town?
That's a great question. So Initially, we were thinking of pickleball lines on this court. Given the fact that the sport of pickleball, it's booming. So if you were to put down pickleball lines, it would be occupied, I think, 24/7. That's just how other communities are. The courts are always jam-packed. You'd also have to probably put up permanent nets, because then people would have to bring their own nets. But what we do now on the courts at Halloran, we actually hold intro to pickleball classes. This is on Thursdays. We usually get people ranging from 50 to 70 to learn how to play. So we paint the lines on the court, bring portable nets, and we teach them intro to play. So we will continue to do that. We will look for other areas to build courts as well. I just think you have to find the right area for them. A lot of things are coming up in other communities where the courts are really loud and in different areas. So we just have to be careful and mindful about where we put them, but definitely we're looking into that.
Thank you. You answered my question. I just wanted to see if it was on the radar somewhere. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Lisa. Any other questions, comments? Heidi?
Let's see if this works any better. I think I'm too short. I know that there are cameras in Halloran Park. Are there cameras in this area that oversee this new addition?
Not at the moment, but that is something that we're going to look into doing.
All right, thank you for that, Heidi. Any questions? Joel, you have a question on this?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the numbers here. I'm having a little problem. You're asking for $164,400 from CPA?
Correct.
Okay, and I'm taking a look at the bids that you got. These bids are apparently, according to Fran's email, from March of 2024?
Correct.
And did the low bidder come back and say that they would still honor the price?
No. So we recently went out to bid again, and we actually had trouble finding some contractors because.
Is this the bid form?
That's the bid form from 2024.
So
I mean,
it
from
doesn't
March.
really mean anything. Other than background.
It was like a cost estimate of, and showing information of the bid that we got.
All right, so how did you come up with the 164,400? Because I can't do the math.
So it was taking the lowest two bidders and then adding like a contingency of like 20% to it.
So are you going to rebid this? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Oh, I didn't get that impression at all.
Yeah, the contractors wouldn't hold that number for that long. Especially we didn't know when we'd be getting supplemental funding at that time.
So how do you know the 164,400 is good?
So we just went out to bid, and I forget which bid number that was, but one of the contractors came back, and we now have sufficient funding for it. We got the bids back today.
You got the bids back today?
Correct.
But that's not here.
No, it was done at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
So can you guys provide some kind of financial analysis showing that with the new bids, the 164.4 is good?
Yeah, absolutely. I can send information on the bids that we just got.
I think that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful, because it was going to be my question, too. Okay, so you're going to email that over then?
Yeah, I can email that bid documentation over. Fran has it.
Yeah, we're voting, we're planning to vote a week from tonight, so that's our window.
Yeah, I'll have Fran send it over. I'll get it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you for requesting that information. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 10, construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding through the CPC? It's cash. So I have a question. There will be enough money to get this done. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 10, construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding? Please identify yourself for the record. Step forward. Eddie. Yeah, just identify yourself for the record. And you have to grab a microphone. Make sure you speak nice and loud so everyone at home can hear you.
How you doing, Ed?
Ed DeFelice, Precinct 6. I have a as I'm in the Stoughton Lions Club, and we've been partnering with Matt for a few years now for the use of the park for our Thursday night concerts, which have ended for this season. One of the problems that I found this year was that we had spoken a little bit earlier about ADA questions. The park has handicap spots, is that what we still call them? But I'm not sure. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. And they're down kind of near the school, toward the school, and more close to the playground. And I guess there's some up at the other end of the park. So there are a couple of entryways through the fence, at least two, but curbing goes across in front of those entrances. So this year in particular, I've been in the park many, many times in the past and never gave that any thought, except my girlfriend has a problem getting over curbs. So the first time she tried to get through one of those openings, it's like, wait a minute, it's an opening to the fence, but not if you have a handicap. So my point is, if we're going to do some work there, I think it's so important that we have something between both extreme ends of the park for people that are handicapped, and that would include spaces in the entryways that we have now through the fence. I think it's a very simple solution. Probably DPW could do it, and we would just probably where it's raised, the curb is raised like 6 inches or whatever it is. That's all we'd have to do is make a little bit of a grade there, probably just out of bituminous, and have a couple of spots right there as handicap, because that's a problem. I mean, she had to go all the way up to the end of the park by the basketball courts, come all the way back to where the concerts were. That's ridiculous. I think it was just an oversight when it was built. But I would hope, I don't know, if, these guys could do something with that as part of this project. But it's really needed, because if she's not in a wheelchair, but if someone in a wheelchair would have even more of a problem. They just would not be able to get into the park. So anyway, if I would like to say that something should be done there, maybe for next season. And a lot of it's pretty simple. It's really simple stuff. I could draw a sketch in 10 minutes, but I mean, it should be a very cheap way of doing it. And maybe I could talk to Matt sometime and give him my thoughts of how it would be done. But and I'm not just doing this because of my girlfriend, okay? It's for anybody that has any kind of handicap, even just to get over a 6-inch curb. It's not fair for those people who have to go all the way at the end and walk all the way back, and then park your car further down going towards the school, because that's basically where the handicap spots are. They're just over there. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments from the public on Article 10, construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding? Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Precinct 3. Thank you to the remarks from the previous speaker, but curb cuts help more than just those of us who are disabled. People who are coming with young people and strollers and things like that. So it's not just for a special group, it's for everyone. Everyone can benefit from being able to roll right in with the baby stroller or the carriage or whatever. And I know it's not really germane to their project, but even if your project is, well, when your project is built, there are people that are going to come with strollers, there are going to be people that may come with wheelchairs or walkers. So it benefits more than just those of us who are disabled.
All right, thank you very much for that. And the questions, comments from the public. Article 10, construction of Halloran Multisport Arena supplemental funding. Hearing none. Next item on the agenda, Article 11, recreational conservation restriction for Glen Echo Recreation Area. Do we have someone to present this?
Good evening. Michael Barrett. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. And I just want to reiterate that the committee has supported both of these articles, although we technically have not voted on them. Our meeting is scheduled for the 15th. Next week, we had to delay it a week. And I fully anticipate that we will get overwhelming votes in favor of both these projects. Matt's already explained that project. Barry Kassler, our program administrator, is going to present the program for funding for a conservation restriction at Glen Echo, which, just so everybody understands, we're providing $30,000 in order for the town's going to incur an expense to put in place this conservation restriction. The money was originally provided in the original Glen Echo acquisition funding back in 2011. Somewhere over time, the approval to spend that money, and it's part of the great work that Biz has done closing out accounts and cleaning up the entries, and she told us this money is no longer available, even though out of the original $1.5 million, we only spent $1.224. So we had plenty of funds still in the CPA. Money didn't disappear. It's in the CPA undesignated fund. And so we have it. We just wanted to proactively make sure that the town had the money. They have the obligation to put the conservation restriction in place. I'll let Barry now explain what the conservation restriction is and how it relates to an existing conservation restriction on the open space part of the project.
Oh, by the way, you won't have to pay any money to use our questions for your vetting when you're ready to do that at the CPA. They're all free questions for you guys to vet. It's interesting that we're getting to discuss an article that you're going to vote. It's backwards, like we used to see it the other way. So it's great. It's great. You feel free to.
They're going to continue presenting right now, Mr.
Yeah.
Lurie.
Okay. Well, as Michael said, this is something that's required under the law. Anytime CPA funds are used to acquire property, there needs to be a conservation restriction established. In the original article that passed town meeting, there were two separate purposes for two separate areas of the Glen Echo Park. The majority of the area was for what I would call conservation and open space use. Is that any better? And that is covered currently by a conservation restriction, which is held by the Wildlands Trust. Inside, in a pocket of approximately 6.7 acres, totally enclosed within that larger area, was an area that is set aside for recreational use. It's called active and passive recreational use in the article where the town acquired the property. And that's so if there was any activity proposed where people couldn't decide whether it was active or passive, either way, it wouldn't matter. It would still qualify. So that has to have a separate conservation restriction established, which is basically an active conservation restriction. It's something that's less common. The town, the town still holds the property, but a third party that is not part of the town must hold the restriction, as Wildlands Trust does, and they're responsible basically for monitoring and making sure that the provisions of the conservation restriction are being followed, and that's what this is. We're requesting the funding to be able to pay an organization to do that.
Well, thank you very much for that.
And I should add, this is a cash spend.
You stole Joel's question already, so. You know.
He's working hard. I don't want to make him work any harder.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 11, recreational conservation? Joel, you do have one. They didn't steal them all then, right?
I've read through this and I've heard you, but I'm still not quite clear what the $30,000 is actually for. Is it architectural fees or design fees, filing fees, a vacation in Acapulco? What?
Mainly it's because if an organization agrees to monitor the property, as for example Wildland Trust does, they take a fee up front to cover their obligation to do that in perpetuity. So this is to cover that fee.
Have you got an agreement in place already on this?
We have a draft agreement written that we worked on over the last year to present. We're waiting in part for the town to decide what kind of uses it wanted to see there, to make sure that when we wrote the agreement, it would be consistent with what the town wanted to see. So we have an agreement. We need to find someone to take it, but we wanted the funding to be available before we actually go to people and say, are you willing to take on this responsibility?
Okay, well, that leads to the question, if the Finance Committee agrees and moves this forward with an approval, will there be an annual cost to this now?
No, it's a one-time fee.
It's a one-time cost of $30,000, and that was it. And I'm assuming the state regulations require this too?
Yes, it's state law that requires there to be a conservation restriction.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Just to clarify my answer, you did ask about filing fees. If there's any, these have to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So the fees to record it is also included in this request.
That's okay. You guys got plenty of cash. I'm not.
I just wanted to make sure you realize that that's part of this request. Not the largest part.
You're very welcome.
Part of it.
Mark, you have a question on this?
Yeah, to piggyback off of the previous speaker, this $30,000 is only for 20 years.
No, perpetuity. Permanent.
This is permanent? I thought I read somewhere that this is only for 20 years.
No, it's permanent.
Okay, all right, I'll have to look into that. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this? Arnie, you have a question?
Hi, thank you for being here. Quick question. I'd like to get an understanding why we have to pay somebody could you explain that again, please?
Sure. When an organization undertakes this responsibility.
Could you speak into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. When an organization undertakes this responsibility, it's a responsibility in perpetuity to monitor, to make sure that the conservation restriction is being complied with. So they come back on a yearly basis and make sure that everything is copacetic, everything complies. It's a legal responsibility. This organization will be responsible for making sure that the town is doing what it is supposed to do under the terms of that agreement.
What are they going to, exactly, what regulations are they going to be monitoring?
They're going to make sure that the town is, the activities that occur within that space are what the town has, are what is in the conservation restriction, and also that it occurs within the bounds specified in that 6.7 acre area.
Which is what? Could you define what those are?
Well, I can give you an example leading back to a previous discussion. If, for example, we went and built pickleball courts in there, they're specifically prohibited as part of the agreement.
Yes.
If they came and they saw pickleball courts, they would come tell us, hey, you're in violation of this agreement. You got to get rid of the pickleball courts.
Okay.
Or some other use like that. If we built a concert venue on this, and they'd come back and say, yeah, no, that's not allowed.
It does make sense. I was just curious what this was all about.
It's just
I've yet to discover this park.
It's a beautiful park. You should go down and see it. It's just a way that the state protected the money that's in the CPA funds to be used specifically for what it was said to be used for. And that we don't go out and buy a piece of property and 10 years later decide, oh yeah, we're going to go do something different.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Arnie. Heidi, you have a question?
So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this because I thought that this was going to be something that it's not. Do we have the same sort of setup with an organization with Bird Street at all? Like, how is that How is that different? As I'm just kind of, I feel like I'm lost. Like, I understand it's the 30,000 to somebody to oversee and to make sure we don't mess it up. But like, do we do that with Bird Street, and how is that different?
The difference is that this is property that was acquired using CPA funds. And if you do that under the law, you have to put a conservation restriction on the property to ensure that it stays within the use that it was intended, that the town designated for it. The larger area that surrounds this 6.7 acres already has such an agreement and already has such a restriction on it.
Well, thank you very much for that. Carolyn, you have a question on this?
Yeah, quick question. So pickleball, wouldn't be a place for pickleball courts?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, no.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any other questions, comments? Jonna, you have a question on this?
I'm just curious about something. If you could just give me like a quick little answer. I know you said you're not going to be putting up pickleball courts, but I'm not clear why that decision was made.
For the reasons Matt talked about earlier, in terms of there was some concerns raised about the potential noise, and that it would impact upon the rest of the rest of the 90 acres that are there for open space, because it's kind of right in there. So people who are going out to enjoy that may not want to listen to pickleball.
Dave, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you for coming with this. I just want to start off by saying the town bought the Glen Echo for $1 million over 10 years ago through the CPA, and it took a long time, but eventually they did an amazing job at building this into a park that you can go and visit. I highly recommend you at least take a drive through there and take a look. It's our park, and it's beautiful, and it's great trails, waterfront, all kinds of great, take your dog, just go out there and picnic. They've got great tables out there. You can do a lot of nice things at the park today. I do want to harken back to a very early, a couple administrations at the CPA ago. There was a discussion about what would be the kinds of things to build there. A lot of people had consensus around the waterfront, making it possible for canoes and kayaking, that kind of thing, which I understand is in the roadmap for that. There was also discussion around putting in a pavilion type thing. I don't know whether that's in the roadmap as well. It was going to go somewhere up on that open area, up on the hill. There was also a very I don't know how, I wouldn't say it was loud, but there were a lot of people who were concerned about the kinds of ball fields that you might end up putting in there, and they didn't want to see that. It was going to be a low impact. One of the things that came to mind for me was a great sport called disc golf, D-I-S-C, disc golf. It's like it's a crazy thing, but people will show up and they do these tournaments and they just show up and they have a great time, and it's very competitive apparently, but it's something that you might look at because it doesn't require cutting down trees. They actually use the trees for the degree of difficulty, I guess, on the course or things like that. But I would recommend that you stay with low impact kind of things, keeping it as pristine as possible. I just wanted to share that.
All I'll say is stay tuned for disc golf.
Okay,
And
thank you very much for that.
Yes, and also stay tuned for a pavilion. It's not in this particular area that's on this question. It is in the protected open space.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions?
I do believe some of the other things you commented on, Mr. Lurie, go back to the original lease when we acquired the property. There were some restrictions on how those things could be used, and they've been carried forth, and those are the types of things that will be monitored through these conservation restrictions. But the couple of good things that you mentioned are definitely on our radar. We've talked about them. You can probably expect to see something at some point.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 11, Recreational Conservation Restriction for Glen Echo Recreation Area? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 11, recreational conservation restriction for Glen Echo Recreation Area. Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Precinct 3. Alluding to something mentioned by a previous speaker, most of the open space in Stoughton is under the control of the Conservation Commission. And there are separate laws for that. They also can't build a house or something on conservation land without going through their state legislature. But this, most of that property was purchased by the taxpayers, and it wasn't under the aegis of the CPA. Didn't exist when we bought that property. So it does sound a little different, but this is what is required for the CPA to pick it up, rather than the general taxpayer in Stoughton. But all of our open space, when this is passed, all of our open space will be very, very well protected from development or sale to the highest bidder.
All right, thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments from the public on Article 11, recreational conservation restriction for Glen Echo Recreation Area? Hearing none, we'll conclude that. Looking for a motion to continue the public hearing until tomorrow.
Well, you got to say a time.
So, Joel, are you going to make a motion to continue this public hearing till a certain time and date in a certain location? Do we have a second? All right, Carolyn's a second. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. Okay.
Motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night.